Glad you're taking the time to spend. Hey, beautiful people, welcome. I am excited. I am glad that you're taking the time to be here for us to hang out. I'm always grateful, and I know this is going to be a very fruitful time for us to have some very intimate and very intentional conversation today. So, isn't God good? I hope you are well, and if you aren't, there'll be better days and we shall all be better. So thank you. I'm really glad that we get to spend time together. You make this so purposeful for me, and I'm very, very glad and ready to do this with you. So please, if you haven't committed to us, please subscribe, please like, and please let us keep the conversations going in the comment section. And if you have already subscribed and you're sharing this information and you're sharing the videos and you're interacting with them, thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful. So I'm excited for us to do this. I can't stop saying that, and I'm glad that we get to do it one more time. So I would like to say welcome to Deep Within, or as I like to call it, the safe zone. So today I would like us to talk about something that has dominated the past few weeks of my life. I've been hearing two words consistently over a couple of weeks now, and I think that if you are like me and you've been in a season, even if it isn't right now, but probably in the recent past, in a season of transitioning, in a season of reinventing yourself, or a very pivotal moment, I think you've heard the words value, and the second word is brand. I have had conversations about value quite a lot, and the question has been, what is your value and what do you bring to the table? So that's something you'll hear quite a lot. And so I went and looked around, and I've been doing some research and delved into some books, as I usually like to do, to find out what I can understand and what we can share about this. So this is not a conversation that is easy, especially for introverts. This is not something that we enjoy talking about, because it puts us on the spot. It puts us on, on the mark, and it's like target practice, so to speak. And there's always that illusion that, talking about brand and value relates to businesses and corporations and, those kind of entities, which is not necessarily true. And so I would like us to sort of delve into what a personal brand might be, or what value is, and how we can, define that, and how we can sort of elaborate that. So join me, and let us have this conversation. So I think that it's quite common for us to ignore talking about our value and to ignore our brand in the course of regular programming, in the course of our regular days. It's hard to miss those conversations and not to do some introspection and consider what that might be, until we are faced with, a conversation that we cannot run away from, like until we are backed up against the wall. Let's say you are trying to enter a relationship, you're trying to enter a new work, arrangement, you're trying to close a deal. And at that point in time, there are questions about who you are as a brand, or as what's your value. And so there and then, you're stuck. You do not know how to define this. And maybe probably you do, but you've not taken the time to sort of do the work and organize and move your pieces around and position yourself in a way that you'd like to be seen. You've not put yourself up for the best outcome. And so I think that it's a constant improvement, a constant process of growth and change, like so many, so many other personal things that we'd like to talk about. And so I think it's important that we do not ignore this value, regardless of where you are, regardless of what season you are in. I think we should be constantly mindful of those facts. We should be constantly mindful of our brand and take care of it. We should be constantly mindful of our value and constantly work to improve it. And I'd like us to, talk about a few of those things and a few of the hallmarks that might define what a brand is, as a personal brand is, that later, trickles down into what we do and who we are. And this is not even about maybe entrepreneurs. It's very easy to think that is a conversation for entrepreneurs, for people in the digital space, but it's also for someone who might think they do the most mundane kind of work in their day. So I think that it's important for us to maintain and to be aware that we do have a brand regardless of where we are and what we are doing. So I think we have to be mindful of who we are. We have to be mindful of what we offer. We have to, and how we convince others of it. And those are entirely three different things: who we are, what we offer, and how we convince others of our value, because it's not always that this value will be seen. Sometimes we'll have to explain it. Sometimes we'll have to, put our best foot forward and, list down all the things we can do. And sometimes it is easy and straightforward for it to be seen. And so I'd like us to talk about all those places and how we can navigate those conversations. So I think that from what I've seen and what I've read, I think your brand is made up of mainly four things. It is your ideas, it is your personality, it is your expertise, but it is also, your reputation, and finally, the fifth thing is your relationships. Okay, I think it is becoming increasingly clear for me, and I think when I was a younger, man, and I think that most people relate to this. I didn't think of relationships as much, of what influence and impact they have on me and the outcomes of the things that I want and the jobs that I want to be and the spaces that I want to, inhabit. But it's very important, the relationships, and this is a point of struggle. I must confess that I struggle with this myself. And this is a place that people struggle with, especially people who are inclined to be introverts. There's an inclination not to consider our relationships and the people in them. But I think it is very important for anybody trying to make themselves or trying to improve and grow their brand and their value. It's important not to ignore the relationships in your life, regardless of whether you are intention about them, whether you are aware of them. They exist, and it's about navigating those relationships and making them work for you instead of against you. So I think we are going to explore those places. We're going to explore how ideas become our brand, how our personality is part of our brand, how our reputation is part of our brand, and most certainly how our expertise is part of our brand, because that filters into what we offer. It filters into what we can do. It doesn't make sense having, the best pitch, the best sales pitch, the best marketing, the best campaign of yourself, and having nothing at the core to offer. So all these things work hand in hand. You cannot have the expertise and do not know how to, leverage those relationships to help you get the word out, to help, the people know that there's an expert out there that can do something. Meanwhile, you cannot have a personality and just shine without ideas. Where is the ideation from? Where is the origin of all this? What are your ideas, and what do they, what is your idea of the world and the problems and the situations that you'd like to navigate? So I'd like us to talk about that. And where do we begin? I think we should begin at defining that and accepting, and I think allowing that we all have a brand, and that is regardless of whether you recognize that or not. You have a brand. You have a brand you have a brand that you portray with your, whether it is at your workplace, they have a perception of you. That is your brand. That is who you are. That's the way they see you. Whether it is your relationships, they see you a certain way. Whether it is your friendships, they see you a certain way. Your competition sees you a certain way in whatever setting it is, all right? The people, your acquaintances, the people who haven't met you and see you from afar, they all have a perception of you, and it is for some of us, it is very distinctive, and there are lines that are drawn between all these, different personalities that we offer to the world. And you know what the most interesting part about it is? The most interesting part about all this is that it's all one person. Can you imagine? Like, it's all one person being accepted and being portrayed to the world in a different way. And so when you come into all these circles, they know you a different way. They know you a certain way. And so it is very important that while you're building your brand, you're not biased, you're not compromising in one area and giving only what you think that one end wants and the other doesn't want. All these relationships, all these portrayals of who you are, all these portrayals of who we are, all these portrayals of what I want you to see should be inspired. They should all spring from the same fountain, the same ideas. They should spring and portray the same expertise. They should spring and portray the same reputation and personality. And so that is how it becomes very easy to reconcile all these personalities. They don't have to know everything about you, all these distinct places. I have had this kind of thing, and just for on a personal level, like where people know me by a different name. I use a different name for the circles that I'm in. I use a different name that feels comfortable to me at work. I use a different name for my friends and for my family. And so even when someone calls me out on the street, I know how and where they know me from by the name they used to call me, or by the nickname. And I think, but that is still the same person. And so we need to be able to have some introspection and look into that of that idea and where this all originates from. And so first we need to recognize, as we've just discussed, that we have a brand. Whether you're aware of it, whether you're conscious of it, whether you're deliberate in making it work, in defining who you are, or whether you're reckless and careless with it, it still remains your brand. And I think that when we understand that, I think it is wiser and it is easier for us to try and make that work on it and improve and grow and define ourselves and be intentional with ourselves and describe ourselves and understand, have some sort of strategy when we are dealing with our personal brand. I read something very interesting, something that said that attention isn't owed, it is earned, right? And I think that on this journey of trying to be a brand and trying to define our value, we should be able to understand that attention isn't owed, it is earned. I think that's important so that we do not buy into the deception of being unreal to ourselves. We don't buy into the deception of presenting an image that we cannot sustain to people, all because we want to, keep that that kind of perception, or because we want to keep that attention that we haven't. And I think it's very easy to give into that, that kind of thing where we sideline our authenticity and, give into fakeness. And I think when we do that, when we sort of try to sell out and be whatever else than we are supposed to be, I think the inclination and ultimately the end result of that is going to be, giving up or doing and sharing more than we should possibly, we could possibly give. I think if you're willing to do that, then you're willing to give an image that you cannot sustain, and therefore you're willing to share more than you should. But I think that if your brand and image and your value is properly managed, it is easy to maintain and to share exactly what you have to share, because your essence will come out, all right? But trying to offer up somebody that we are not will give the inclination, and ultimately we are going to put ourselves all out and give even when we shouldn't give. And yet we are entitled to have some things that remain ours. And so I think it is important for us. And I know, in the workplace and everything, for example, if someone is trying to get into a certain role in the workplace, there's an inclination, there's a temptation to try and be somebody else, to try and sell something that you aren't. But you're not bad as it is. Like your being yourself is not wrong. It's just different, and we have to recognize that. And we are going to talk a bit about that a little bit more. And it's not difficult. It could be difficult trying to convince people, like I said earlier, convince people of what you're trying to do, if you're trying to act in a different way. And so I think it's important for us to embrace that, to embrace our differences in how we do things, in who we are. We can only be ourselves and not anybody else. And so the question is just I think the idea should be to just remain yourself, to remain the person that you can definitely stand behind, to remember to incorporate your ideas, to remember to incorporate your expertise, to remember to incorporate your reputation that you've garnered over the years, to remember to incorporate your relationships and your personality into who you are. It's okay to be different, to do things differently, to come from a different angle. It just has to remain relatable. It just has to remain understandable. It just has to be able to build relationships. When we are closing a deal, we are not closing a deal. We are opening up to new relationships. We are trying to build a community, even on a personal level. And I think we have for a long time ignored and reserved these things for corporations and entities with big budgets and, volumes of transactions. But I think that we should go back a bit. We should draw back a bit and look inward and, treat ourselves as such, treat ourselves like we are purposeful and we have a place and we have, something to fulfill, something to give to the world. So like I already, said, for an introvert, this is a conversation that is way off the charts. Even for me just to have it, even for me to have had, the reasons and all that, the being in the seasons that I've been in, trying to understand this, thing. It's not something that I'm quick to understand or quick to talk about, but I realized that to be able to even say, oh, I'm so good at this and being able to do this, I have to bring my entire self. I have to be able to dig into the experiences I have had. I have to be able to dig into the triumphs that I have had, the victories that I've had, and present this. And we shall talk about that and how that also factors into us being a brand. I cannot just present my papers or present, my success or the idea in which I've prospered and say, that is it. And I isolate myself from it and leave it to be gauged. But I'm the bearer of that. I am the vessel of that information. I'm the vessel of that skill, of that gift, of that idea. And so I have to come with it. And so it is important. And that's why I keep reiterating that we cannot ignore being a brand. We cannot ignore seeing ourselves as such. We cannot ignore seeing ourselves as vessels of value, as carriers of value. And so it is important for us to consider that. So it is not, we cannot consider it, we cannot think that it is non-existent. For how long? Even if you sit at a desk, there is a brand that you must carry of yourself before it factors into a brand of the team that you're in, before it factors into the brand of the organization you're in. Because even when we think about it, like if that organization is taken away from you, if that team is taken away from you, if that role is taken away from you, how easy or how hard will it be for you to transition into a different role? If you've let that define you, and it's okay for that job to define you, for that role, for that relationship, for that circumstance and season to define you, but you should have a definition that is fundamental to that, a definition that is beyond that, that strives and thrives out of that shines through, and that your personality is seen even in your work. And so because you understand who you are as a brand and what your value is, even if you're chosen for the most out of the world role that you've not considered yourself for, it is easy for you to translate who you are as a brand. It is easy for you to translate your value and pour it into that, and seamlessly flow on with that life and that role. Okay, so I think it's not just about building about a fortress. I think it's about becoming that brand, the person that you are, the person that you want to be perceived as, to be known as. And that way it's a process. And I think that we need to be around people and relationships and even ourselves through all this. I think it is important for us to be around people that can hold us accountable, and while we also hold ourselves accountable, because it is a continuous process of failing and trying again over and over again. And so I think we need someone to hold us, someone who might be able to see the vision that we're trying to accomplish and be, and regarding our brand. And this is where relationships come in. We cannot ignore relationships. You cannot be a lone ranger in this. You have to build relationships. They're important for us to be able to define ourselves adjacent to those relationships, and also individually, and to be able to draw yardsticks and compare, A and B and C together and see what we can find. So again, relationships, you see them coming through in trying to make a brand, trying to define your value, and so because it will not happen overnight, you need someone to hold your hand, you need a mentor, you need compatriots, so to speak. And so I think that all this talk of branding and value, I think I kind of hinted on it at the start. There is an inclination, there is a bias to just give in what is already working, in the generic picture, that every bookkeepers should be the same. They should look the same. They should study the same things. Every data analyst is the same. Every content creator is the same. But that is not true to the essence of who we are as human beings. That is not true, even just from the way we look, just from the way we present ourselves, just the way we have ideas. And I know that there is, things that have been searched and researched about people being different. And so the first thing about creating a brand and understanding that there are outliers sometimes, some extraordinary circumstances and people and ideas. And I think we should be able to embrace those ideas, especially if we are the bearers of those ideas. We are, it's not a generic thing about being a brand. We all cannot be the same. It's okay to be different and to do things differently. It's okay for me to approach a problem a certain way and for you to have a different angle to it. It's okay for you to have a certain way of tidying up something, and it's different for me to bring creativity in maybe how I do my financial analysis and how you do your data analysis. It's okay for us to be different, and I think that we have to embrace that, and we have to also rely and be confident and comfortable that the people over us, the people who are instructing, the leaders, the people who are supervising these roles, understand that it's okay for people to be different and to be able to do things differently. And so I think that it's also important for us to embrace that. And I think for me, on a personal level, I think that for the longest time I struggled with understanding that, just like I struggled with understanding the importance of relationships. And there are cliches that I said about relationships. They say it's 10% what you know and it's 90% who you know. There's things like your network is your net worth. And on top of that, I think that another thing, and if anyone is an introvert will kind of agree with, I think I've also struggled with trying to understand that you might be unprepared if you think that it's a one-way fits all. I think that it's very, very detrimental. It actually almost scares me to think about it, to be very, very unconscious of the fact that we are different. And if I'm supposed to be a certain way, if I'm supposed to do a certain thing, then it's possible for me to take a different path. If I'm trying to get into content creating, it's possible for me to take a certain approach. If I'm trying to go into marketing, for example, it's possible for me to not have gone to university. And I'm not saying that these are unnecessary things. That are very important because they point to something we discussed earlier that is important: expertise. You need to be able to bring something tangible to the table. And so you may dismiss yourself, disregard yourself because you do not have a university degree in marketing. You may disregard yourself because you don't have a degree in journalism, and yet these are areas that you might be able to triumph in, that you might have a skill set for, as long as you're willing to work and to polish it. I think that we have to do away with that mindset of thinking that there is only one way to arrive at something, and it's quite frustrating, to be honest. And I've experienced this in my different times I've tried in my past, trying to become something, trying to do certain things, and there are all these gatekeepers, there are all these barricades that are put in place just to keep people away. And I think that it's unfair. I think that we should have a conversation about keeping people out, people who are passionate about things and people who are willing to do and to learn and to be able to achieve in this and thrive in these areas and contribute handsomely to these places, but they're kept out because a certain man or woman or board or council somewhere sat down and said someone must have a university degree to be able to enter into this place. And it's not like the university degree will will hold them up. And there are numerous people failing in that area who have the university degrees. And there's someone who doesn't have a university degree, but they are willing to learn. They're willing to bring a fresh, perspective. They're willing to put in the work, and they're locked out because they do not fit a certain mold. And I think you become immensely unprepared. And that's something that I've learned, and something I've tried to dismiss and to unlearn for myself, is that I've kind of put all these things ahead of the things that I have naturally, the skill set that I have naturally, to kind of shun it because the world has told me that is not applicable, that is not useful here, I think that ties us to places, it ties us to roles and makes us disadvantaged more than we are. I think that is something that we need to deeply have conversations about letting people into spaces that they can hold up their end and believing people to do things, and not to be so dismissive of skills and, sets that do not fit into a role. For example, someone might wonder what communication, a skill set in communication, what use does it have to an engineer? What use does it have to an accountant, right? They should be able to analyze, they should be good at maths, they should be all these other things, and they shouldn't be able to communicate, right? So all these roles, all these kind of things are dismissed, and down the path, someone is, cast into a role, and somewhere in the JD, somewhere along those lines is something about, having to keep up with the stakeholders, having to be able to communicate with the stakeholders. But this is something that was dismissed. This is something that could have allowed somebody else to shine in that role. So I think that it's important to embrace all the fragments of who you are. And I was listening to someone recently talk about something on a podcast, and they're talking about how they are including everything they've done, even content creation, into their applications, into their CVs. And I'm sure the CVs do not, all the jobs they're applying for have nothing to do with with content creation. But I think that is such a profound thing, to embrace every idea of who you are. I think that if you're a footballer, you should be able to put that on your CV. That is how outwardly I'm thinking about this. You should be able to put that on your CV. I think if you play the violin, you should be able to put it on your application for an accounting role. I think that's something that goes into, because all these roles, all these things provide a certain skill set that might not be hard on paper, but it's something that can help make a role, someone to thrive in a role. So I think we need to identify our unique experiences as part of trying to define our brand. The stories you've had, the stories you've gone through, the triumphs you've had, the excellences you've had. We cannot duplicate stories. Something that I've gone through has molded me and might make me perfect to be in a certain place, might make me something marketable to an industry. And so I think identify your stories, identify your role, your experiences. Creatives cannot only be in entertainment. They can be in data analysis. They can be in financial management. Creativity can be in management, in leadership, in human capital management. The role stays behind, but the uniqueness and the expertise and the stories you take from that place are what define you, are what define the possibilities, are what define your ability to do a certain role and to duplicate and to be able to translate and to be able to reproduce that work that you've done before. So while you're defining yourself, while you're defining your value, your stories should be at the forefront. The experiences you've had, the triumphs you've had, the victories you've had, these are the relationships, the interactions you've had with certain things and certain ideas, and they can never be the same. Just like no two fingerprints, belonging to different people are the same. And so I think it is important that if you do not know those stories, to take account of your past, to create space, give yourself space to investigate, to prepare, you need to isolate yourself, even though not physically or literally, but to isolate yourself to be able to identify what makes you different and how your stories and the originality in your stories. And then you need to think about who you have to become to serve the people that you want to serve. And I would like you to think about this not just as content creators, because there's that perception that these are conversations for content creators and things like that. But even when you're applying to be an employee somewhere, there's someone you have to become to serve a certain boss. And I think that's something you have to think about, and how unique you are for that place, and how you'd go forward, and how you could offer that expertise. Okay? You're offering a solution to a problem, or are you giving a new idea? Are you coining a new idea, something that has not been seen? It's important too, after identifying your experiences, after identifying your stories, after identifying who you have to become to serve, then you have to identify what you're offering. Are you offering a how-to? Are you offering an idea, a new idea? And they're both, faced with different challenges. The competition of a how-to is that there are so many other ways of doing whatever you're offering to do. So what makes yours stand out? Meanwhile, the one for an idea is a bigger challenge, but it's also a more fulfilling position to be in, because you have to convince people that, first of all, there is a problem. All right? So you're basically creating, and you have to convince people that there is a problem, and you have the idea, and your idea works, and your idea is fresh, and it can bring great results. Okay, so while we might be, as human beings, we are not easy and we are not very welcoming of change. I think that's where the downside is. And I think this is also when we go back to the conversation about being accountable and having relationships, is that it takes a while for people to adapt to new ideas, to accept them as ways of doing things, to expect a certain sort of success. And that is where it is important for us not to forget that we are social human beings, that we need relationships to hold us up, to pull us up when we are feeling down. So I think it's important to realize what you're offering, who and how, and to who you're offering it to. All right. And I think it's also important to consider time, all right, because it might be a while before you're accepted. It might be a while before your way of doing things is accepted, but you're building a brand, you're building a personality, you're building expertise, and all these things take time. And so it is important to be aware of time, to be intentional about it, to be patient. This is not about, having this conversation and the next minute you're out thriving. It might take time. It might take a few failures. It might take a little new adjustments, a new, restructuring, rethinking things. You might need to recalibrate a certain few ideas, to reinvent numerous times. It's such an indulging thing to do. And so I'd not like us to think that it's just, a one-way thing that can be done in a day. And so you also need to think about your skill set, that expertise. Is it for a one size fits all? I think it's also important for you to narrow it down, to be able to define yourself at a much thinner level before you can take on such a great responsibility. Oh, what can you do? I can do anything. That is as unclear, and it lacks clarity. It sounds of, I'm waiting for you to define me. I cannot define myself. It doesn't sound confident. It doesn't have esteem. It doesn't have essence. It is important to know where you fall in a chain or in a procedure of something, or in a distribution channel somewhere. You need to be able to define your place, to position yourself. It's always said, another cliche, a jack of all trades is a master of none. So I think it's important to, while you can, at the core, to be able to define yourself, all right, on a smaller level, okay? So you need to explore that, and that is where the creating space comes in. You need to create the space to be able to figure all these things out. So where do we really begin to define our brands? If we are looking at that, we've had this conversation, and we need to sort of talk about, how do we define our brands? First of all, it comes from our values, from our ideas of the world, from how we perceive things. That is one area that defines our brands. If you're looking for somewhere to begin, your values about the world. How do you see the world? How do you see people? How do you see human kindness? Where do you want to fit into that role? Which kind of sufferings do you want to alleviate? Which kind of problems do you want to solve? Which kind of things, touch your heart? And of course, we talked about our experiences and our stories, and we've talked about, our interactions with people and how we make them, feel, and what impact we want to have on them. It's important for us to know that. It's important to know our platform. What is our platform? If you're a content creator, it is easy to talk about YouTube and TikTok and all these platforms. While you're working in a desk job, what is your platform? You need to be able to define that, so that you know how to navigate that place. You know how to position yourself. I know a great guy who does financial articles, and he posts, and he has a mailing list, and he has a readership, a quite big readership, every month, because he has figured out his platform. He has figured out where, best to get people to listen to him and to hear his ideas. And then we need to think about our positioning strategically. We need to position ourselves, all right? We need to position ourselves visually. We need to position ourselves verbally and towards value. Okay, we need to see particularly how our positioning plays out, how we positioned in people's minds, how we positioned in society, in our community, in our relationships. Are we leaders? And if we are leaders, are we positioned that as servants? We need to understand all that and factor that into our brand. We need to leverage our high value to provide accessible and affordable services. If you look at most of the luxury brands, their highest selling products are usually their most affordable products, So we need to be able to leverage our high quality, not compromise on it, but be able to provide services and, products that we believe in. Okay. We also need to know where we stand with competition, but also to be able not to compromise and stay grounded on our values. Remember our values and our ideas. We also need to be properly paced. We need to pace ourselves, not to run out, of gas, not to crash into something that we cannot, understand. you need to understand where you are. Are you a beginner? Are you an intermediate? Or are you an expert? It is important that if you're a beginner, you should treat yourself with value, but also do not call for considerations that might come at your expert level. I think that might be overreaching, but also be mindful not to compromise on that, but also be mindful to know when to take correction, when to take, when to take, a subsidized offer, or let's say when to take a certain consideration or position because of where you are, but to also have a projection and make sure that you not go into a place because you're a beginner and you're okay going into a place that will not, comfortably work with your brand. All right. So differentiation is important, and to remember to reposition yourself as the need arises, to reinvent yourself, because that is part of being a brand that withstands time. I think it's very easy if we take a case study of most of the companies and the most successful corporations in the world. They are willing to reinvent themselves. They are willing to evolve. And so it's not going to be a one job that after all this process you've gone through, you've defined yourself and you're not going to change. The beauty about life, the beauty about, that kind of thing is change and being able to reinvent yourself and refining and rediscovering what about you might work in the next age. And we shall have a conversation about change very soon, a very profound conversation that I can't wait for us to have. And so I think it's important that way to also think about, to be clear and to have concrete values, concrete purposes. What impact do you want to create? All right. I think what can help you define the impact you want to create and how to price yourself, especially about price. Price is very important when it comes to brands, especially personal brands. There's always a need, there's always a desire by, maybe hiring managers to abuse that and to sort of give people what they are not worth. But I think that to be able to price yourself, you should be able to create and to speak about how you're going to save someone's time, how you're going to save them the energy to and the resources to learn a skill, right? And how you're going to save them money. Okay, so you need to be able to define yourself in that place, and that will give you an edge, it will give you an advantage to be able to talk about who you are and to be able to defend what your brand is. However, you can, I think as long as you can attach this to purpose, feel free to always adjust. Feel free, these are not set in stone, to always define yourself in ways that can work for you. Okay, so be also clear about who your consumer is, even in the workplace. Yes, even when you're sitting at a desk, who is the consumer of whatever you're giving, and what are their values, what are their expectations, and how does that help your brand? All right, I think the greatest thing about being a brand and being of value is how you serve and how you recognize that you're not just above everybody else, but you're also here to improve, to change, and to solve problems. Okay, so be ready, be confident to validate, be ready to create, be ready to refine, be ready to make as many launches of who you are as possible. After going back to the drawing board, you are your own research and development department. All right, but in all this, when all this has been said, please create boundaries. Okay, create boundaries, vet and monitor access to your brand, to yourself, and to the value that you've created. Okay, and remember to package. Package is very important. How you present the ideas is very important. But also remember, relationships, your collaborations matter, your friendships matter. The people who pour into you matter, and ultimately what you think of yourself matters. This was such a long conversation, but I'm glad that we've been able to have it. I'm glad that we've been able to share. Please, I always ask that you let's keep the conversation going in the comments. All right, if you haven't subscribed, I'm calling on you once again. This is a call to action. Please subscribe, share this with anyone you think that might be helpful with, and also suggest some other things that we can talk about. I'm always glad and I'm grateful when you take the time to be with me and to spend it here. This is such a purposeful thing for me to do, and I feel glad and I'm grateful, and I hope you have a great time. See you next.